Welcome to this masterclass. So just a little bit about me, just in case if somebody is not familiar with me. My name is Elena, and I am an emotional wealth or emotional capacity coach for women. And I support women to increase their emotional capacity and create their inner strength so that they can start repurposing some of their older stories and beliefs somatically through the body, through mindset shifts, and start to create life on their terms. The life on their terms is quite significant for myself, because I do believe that when we are making decisions which are aligned with ourselves, with our true self, it just instantly and in a really big way changes the way that life is happening through us, that we are able to enjoy life a little bit more. And when it comes to capacity, so our capacity to feel, capacity to be able to do things, capacity to experience life, quite often there are certain things that might look like or sound like they're a bit of a joy stealers. And a lot of the time in work and in life, they start to dress. And in particular, one of them that I wanted to discuss with you today is guilt. I'm going to share my screen now. So, guilt. The reason I chose guilt is because pretty much all the women that I speak to, whether it's my clients or whether it is overall in life or whether it's myself, guilt often comes up. Overall, this is pretty much a sign of something that not to be scared of. And overall in my work, I love to look at anything that drains us, so-called negative emotions, negative thoughts, to look them as messengers, something that is showing to us that maybe there is something to be looked at, maybe there is something that needs to be replenished. And I can relate to guilt very much. When I was in corporate, some of you might know that I used to work in corporate and international logistics for many years. I have two kids, they are 12 and 15, and managing young kids, career, looking after the house, all sorts of things, quite often is exhausting and overwhelming. And so often I would catch myself thinking, I either am guilty of not doing enough for everybody else, or I'm guilty of not looking after myself. But overall, these emotions of shoulds, I should do more, I'm not doing enough, they would keep coming up. So I have met and I have got to know guilt very well. And I'm not saying that I don't meet it anymore, but I wanted to share with you today a different way that I started to relate to guilt, which has been really helpful for me to create more energy in my life. So today's masterclass is called From Guilt to Joy. And we're going to go through it by embodying feminine energy. Feminine energy overall, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit, but it is about inviting more flow into our life. Because structure can follow the flow. We want to have that flow of energy first. And we want to live our life with joy. I always say that if we're between experiencing life with joy and no joy, I would always choose joy. Because life is here to be outfit. But we're going to talk about it, how guilt in particular is showing to us that perhaps there is a bit of an imbalance between the energies within us. If I speak energetically, and as a background, just in case if you are not familiar with my work, I am also a trauma-informed yoga teacher, and I have worked and swallow. I've done yoga for many years. I have been teaching, and in my work, I look a lot into the philosophy, in the Eastern philosophies, and energetically, guilt is considered to be connected very much so with the creative feminine energy. So this is why, in particular, I want to look at the guilt today to see how we can start to work with it, to shift us from one emotional state towards the other, from guilt to joy. Experiencing life differently. So sometimes it could be same experience, but different emotional state, different perspective. So before we start looking into guilt, I wanted to share something with you in regards to our energetics of feminine and masculine. And you would have seen some of those symbols before: yin and yang, divine feminine, divine masculine. We all have qualities of both energies within us. And just like in any relationship, in order to have a successful relationship, though, creating a partnership, to have those bits working together, just like puzzle pieces. Masculine energy is something that you might be familiar with, because that's the force that is driving us throughout the day. That's something that gives us structure, direction, safety, helps to set and maintain our boundaries. Something that helps us to maintain our discipline and also show leadership qualities. So we're talking about energetics. It's not that masculine is only relatable to men. No, so we have those both energies within us. And quite often we might be experiences when we are going through a lot of things, a lot of that mess. We also equally need to have the feminine energy within us, which is our intuition, sense of flow, helps us to develop more compassion for ourselves, for others, our nurturing energy, supports our sensitivity and creativity as well. And then when these two energies meet up, that helps us to be present, gives us more clarity, because we are not being pulled into one or the other direction. That helps us to build trust within ourselves as well as towards the others. And from there we start having sustainable action. So we are not in conflict within. Sustainable action comes from that partnership between two energies. Quite often in life though, and I wonder if some of you might relate, we might go into disbalance between some of them. And I will look into how it looks like out of balance. And maybe you might relate to some of them. And I might give you a couple of examples. So masculine without feminine and feminine without masculine. I'll just share with you again. So I was just checking if somebody joined me chance. If I will get a bit of nods from you when you are looking at the slides, or you will hear me out. We start to push. It starts pushing, hustling energy. It's a lot of doing without potentially having enough clarity or alignment, which can cause a burnout. And I wonder how many of you can relate to burnout. I definitely can relate to that. We disconnect from ourselves as well as the others. We're focusing on a task. We're not necessarily connected to people around it, connected to ourselves. or even sometimes towards the process. I when I was, and I can tell you, I actually went to burnout even without it. So I would go into burnout not necessarily after into work, not enough time for myself, my health. I burned out a couple of times as I was working in corporate mom, juggling young children, trying to make everybody happy, but in the end, I was suffering. And I even ran into burnout when I initially started my business. And to be honest, I am noticing those signs even every now and then when I am starting to maybe lead more towards into that masculine side. But the good thing is that we always can try and gently pull ourselves back. Equally, feminine without masculine energy might look like overwhelm, not being able to make decisions, feeling stagnant or stuck, lacking confidence, and having a lot of self-doubt. And I wonder if you can also see how when we're out of balance, we can go between the other. We just going from one extreme towards the other. That definitely happened to me. So here is a little bit more that we can look, and I put some of probably relatable photos here. So we're talking about feminine energy, but I want to see if so feminine energy to be able to unlock and shift us from guilt to joy, but also being able to identify where we can see that imbalance. So the imbalance also can come as we are becoming too masculine to the point of I call them toxic here. And a lot of the time, women can internalize both. We can be both at the same time. We can be the hustling, pushing through, overriding the body woman who is trying to meet everybody's needs, who then starts to measure herself with that worthiness equaling productivity rather than her self-esteem and herself. We might not ask for help or just feeling like this is going to be faster. I'll just do it. I will go through it. I'll do it. It becomes too hard to stop. And we might be equally going through those. And sometimes, yes, as I put here, quite often, this is rewarded by society. That's the reality. I worked in a dominant male industry prior to starting my business and working in mindfulness and in coaching. And believe me, I know it very well. Trying to keep up with men at work while juggling young children and just overall, the requirements would be to be like a man, but then at the same time, you have your own other things to be done at home differently. And look, regardless of the family situation, or showing overly masculinity. But there's the other side of have that weakened feminine, or sometimes the burnout of the masculine altogether. So what happens? Wouldn't be. It wouldn't be today with without some internet dramas. So I was talking about the we can see. This is me handling things in crisis. It's not even crisis, right? What is it? It's just the internet connection. No problem at all. Some of the things that I think we can recognize, because think about it, if there is too much masculine, that means that because we all have capacity, our capacity does not necessarily increase just because we need to have more Just because we need to have more masculine energy, we are not necessarily going to expand our capacity unless we're working quite proactively with our capacity, which is something that I do a lot with my clients. But imagine that we have that same capacity, we are pushing, and what happens to our feminine energy? As we start shrinking, we're coming towards self-sacrificing, putting everybody's needs before our own, overgiving. Because if you're pushing through, you're doing too much at work, maybe you start to overgive to others just to catch up and avoid that sense of guilt that we're going to talk in just a moment. You start to have guilt when you're resting. Because you're so wired up, the rest starts to feel unfamiliar. And again, it feels like, well, I should be doing something else. The shoulds come back. We start to avoid things to the point where, because we have that stagnant energy within us and avoidance, we start to think that, oh, maybe this is my body is telling me to avoid the situation. So we are not really able, without that clarity, when two energies are balanced, we are not quite seeing clearly the difference where we avoid versus where we are making an aligned decision. And quite often we are waiting instead of choosing, which means that we might start to outsource our self-esteem, outsource making decision. Instead of saying, this is what I would like, we start to think about what do the other people want. And then in the end, perhaps, that cycle of sacrificing continues. And at the end of the day, nobody is really happy. Because if we are not in alignment, if our decisions, if our choices are not quite aligned, we would not feel too good about. Well, you would say to me, that sounds pretty gloomy. Maybe some of you might recognize yourself. And if that's you, I see you. I see you because I was one of you. And sometimes I am still. The reason I'm describing this so well is because I have learned the both sides pretty well. But what that has given me an opportunity to put together everything that I have learned in my personal experience, in my studies, in my professional experiences, in multiple industries that I have worked in. So I can present it to you now as a different way to handle it. So if that's you, that's not a personal failure. That's a survival pattern. And we can change that. And I'll just show you just one more beautiful slide to see what happens when we do get back into the alignment. And why is it important? So when we start to connect to our divine feminine, because the society with all the hustle and bustle, in a way drives us into that overly masculine energetics. And we need to be quite strong within ourselves to remind ourselves, this is the reason. The reason we want to claim our feminine energy and to balance it with masculine healthily is because we want to be aligned. We want to have our inner truth. We want to lead through that creativity, through our nurturing energy, but nurturing from cup full, not self-sacrificing, but nurturing others after nurturing ourselves. We want to lead our life with ease. We want to feel present and have that very natural gentleness in us. And at the same time, we do not choose either or. We can still have that clear direction of masculine energy within, because balancing out our feminine energy balances out the masculine. And what that gives us is confidence, is boundaries. We are able to lead from our cup full and still have structure. We are becoming more decisive, but our decisions are aligned. And then we feel supportive because we feel supported. Our support, our nurture starts within, and then it expands outside. So you would say to me, well, Elena, that sounds so good. However, what do we do? What do we do on a day-to-day basis? Well, here's the thing. Guilt, just like any of the other negative emotions, are our best friends. And hear me out why. And before I share the next string with you, I wanted to share a bit of a personal story. Why guilt is my best friend? Because guilt was the emotion that showed me the process that I am teaching you now, and overall I'm supporting my clients on. And don't get me wrong, I had met guilt in all the different situations even beforehand, but I'll tell you about one particular time that I faced it very clearly. And it was a couple of years ago when I was already building my business, going through my burnout. Well, essentially, I had left corporate, massive burnout after COVID. And what did I do? I threw myself into building my business. At the time, it was yoga business, working with children, working with adults. And what I do best, I threw myself into it. I was teaching lots of classes. I was doing some studies on the side. I was trying to be the best mom that I could possibly be, because I had still that residual guilt from maybe being present physically, but not necessarily mentally and emotionally when I was in corporate, because it was extremely stressful time for me. So you can picture me again, driving between appointments, kids, schools, everything happening. And there was one day where we got in a car crash with my daughters. And luckily we walked away unscathed. But that night, like, the car was a write-off, and there were some other things there as well. And what do, you know, as a parent, as a mom in a car with your children? All these things were coming up in my mind, you know, what ifs. And this whole circle of guilt, because was that the car? Did I do something wrong? Because I was trying to pacify the kids, and it was one of those situations when things just happened, and luckily nothing happened to anyone else around us. And as I was lying that night next to my youngest daughter, because she was too scared to sleep by herself, obviously, but I was glad she was next to me. She was holding my hand, I was holding her hand. And that guilt, because no matter what, I felt responsible, right? You feel responsible for this happening. And that guilt was so strong, was so overwhelming. I could taste it pretty much. But that moment, I also recognized that I can either let it destroy me, or I can learn to work with it. What is it actually asking of me? What is it that I do? I tried to just feel it for a couple of seconds at a time, just lean into it, just listening. And that was the answer. The answer was that all it needed from me was to observe it. All it needed from me is to be able to stay there with myself and without guilt. And at the time, I'm not telling you that straight away this framework came up for me. No, It was very intuitive. It was very much tiny bits and pieces, steps by steps. But what I recognized that in order for me to work with it, there were a couple of elements that were needed. And one of them was to understand that energetically, that same energy of guilt was pointing to me its twin sister emotion. And the twin sister emotion of guilt is actually joy. The shame and blame and regrets, they normally come like they kind of like a, close friends of it. But each of the emotions they have a twin. And when it comes to guilt, its twin sister emotion is joy. When we are in that open state, when we are in a depleted state, it turns into guilt. And here is what I want to share with you. So something that I want you to remember from today's class is that guilt, just like any other negative emotion, but we are zooming in on the guilt today, is a messenger. It's an invitation. And it's an invitation to bring its twin sister in, which is joy. Guilt is not a flaw. It's your learned response. And it normally responds to nervous system being overloaded. When we start running on empty, our negative emotions are coming up towards the surface. Energetically, when we are running on empty and our energy is low, we are pretty much becoming capable to experience lower frequency emotions first. And if you're not familiar with lower and high frequency emotions, I want you to think about, if we look at the bottom, we will have all the emotions which make us feel drained. So we say fear, guilt, anger, self-doubt, grief, overwhelm. And then the higher ones would be the ones that are boosting us up, which is joy, which is gratitude, which is love. If we are depleted energetically, it's much harder for us to experience anything that is not the lower spectrum of emotion. So my invitation to you today is just to consider that when the guilt comes up, all it's trying to do is to invite you to look into your energy and invite the twin sister, which is joy. And I want to show you it in a bit of a simple graphic of this staircase. And I call it spiraling up. Because quite often when we are experiencing lots of strong emotions, we might be thinking of, I'm spiraling out. And I invite you to think about your strong emotions or emotional state as a staircase instead. Yes, you might notice yourself as maybe the guilt starts to pop up, that you are loading. And the thing with our energetics like guilt, it also starts to drain you slightly more and more and more. However, the moment you notice, you can take a pause. You taking a pause, you're standing on a stair. You taking a pause allows you to stop the movement down and then make a decision. You can maybe take a stand and just have a bit of a moment here. Notice where your energy levels are. Maybe you're able to take a step up. But the key here would be your emotional capacity, your energies. How energetic are you? If you're feeling quite low, we will need to boost you up. And we can also look at it as inviting joy. in. And I want you to remember that no matter what happens, anything that you feel is okay. You know, if you are finding yourself down on a staircase, it's all right. You can pause at any time. You can pause and make a decision after. Something that I want you to be very aware of, and it probably will resonate. One of the things about guilt, shame, anger, all of those emotions is that they like to come in a spiral. And spiral, one of the reasons it's spiraling, because I wonder if you can resonate. Sometimes we might be guilty, we feel guilty, and then we feel guilty because we felt guilty. For example, you decided that from now on, I'm not going to feel guilty anymore, which is, to be honest, is not very realistic. The idea here is we recognize it where it is. And then when you feel the emotion, to remember that, all right, that is okay. Because if we start to feel guilty because we are guilty, then it creates more and more of that emotional drainage. And say you became feeling guilty here, and then you feel more guilty and more guilty. We're just going down, down, down. We can stop at any time. We can stop and reset. And here is something that I wanted to share with you today. Well, let's talk about first joy. So joy is a sister emotion. One of them, well, in particular, joy is very generous because joy lives with abundance. Guilt appears when we have not enough resources, and let's just say we don't have enough time, we don't have enough energy. Because if you feel very energetic, very joyful, if you have plenty, you are not going to be, you don't have to choose, you don't have to pick and choose. When we have very little energy, you think, okay, I need to spend this amount of energy to, say, make dinner for the family, or I could go for a walk. And then this becomes a choice, because if you spend the energy this in one, then you cannot have the other. And then we have this dilemma, because if I go for a walk, then I feel guilty that I haven't made dinner. But if I make dinner, then I potentially will feel guilty that I'm not doing something, I'm not exercising, I'm not looking after myself. This dilemma only happens because there is not enough energy. Here's why raising our energy resources straight away helps you to shift into a more abundant state. Because when you have more energy, you don't need to choose either or. You can do and. So your joy is essentially your elevated guilt. Because the moment guilt starts to climb up that staircase, the moment it climbs up the staircase, it transforms. Because once you start to have more capacity, there's no need to feel guilty. You actually feel happy. You feel happy about, if I have more energy, then maybe I can have a walk and cook dinner, or maybe I will cook dinner faster because I do have more energy. How many of you can relate that once we start, for example, exercising, we get more energized? Once I actually get more sleep, even though I have lots of things to do, but I'm actually going to be more focused. So we're not necessarily going to have more time, but we start to become more efficient at using it. And we are, by doing something and enjoying it, once again, we are increasing our capacity. That's the beauty of joy. But let's not forget that guilt is a messenger. It's just a messenger. All it's trying to tell us, more energy, more joy. That's all it's trying to tell us. Nothing else. I wonder if that makes you feel slightly different towards it. And then with our joy, so the beauty of joy, and this is why I always encourage everyone to start to think about enjoying life. Because sometimes, and again, it might sound like deep into those negative emotions. Again, negative for me is just messengers. But if energetically we are so low that we are not even able to experience that or see clearly what we're experiencing, then we get out of habit, we get out of joyful habit. But something for you to remember that, joy elevates us. So the more joy you have, the more energy you have. And this is why guilt invites joy in. Guilt is saying, hey, can you please bring my sister joy? Because with my sister joy, you will have so much energy straight away. Who has ever experienced it that maybe you are very tired and then, I don't know, somebody says a nice joke or somebody smiles at you and all of a sudden, there is a little bit of energy boost straight away. Our energy cup starts to get fuller and we are closing leaks gently. If we start to, anytime we notice, for example, guilt showing up, all right, let's bring joy. So we're not necessarily, we might be occasionally still leaking in there, but we are able to notice that and closing the leaks very quickly. And we have all of these other, just like guilt has its bit of a gang of friends, guilt, blame, shame, anger. And I'm smiling when I'm saying this because all of these emotions, they are just showing to us what is needed. What is needed in your life right now? Number one, energy. But number two, the twin sister. And I wanted to share with you today this process that I call 3 N's. Name, notice, nurture. How do we shift? Because you say, well, Elena, it all sounds amazing. I do want to embrace guilt as my best friend. But how do you do it? And to tell you the truth, the reason I make it quite simple is because that's exactly how things started to crystallize for me. Tiny steps. Because when you are in the thick of an emotion, I always encourage you to ask for help if it's possible, whether it's your friends, family, whether you are talking to a coach, a counselor or somebody, but it is about also some little steps that I can do by myself. So think about 3 N's: name, notice, nurture. Name on its own, it could be we can identify what is the emotion. And then we can think about it, all right, where in the body do I feel guilt? And if it's something right now you cannot relate, maybe you can remember a particular experience, but maybe it's something that you might think about next time when you do feel guilty. Where do you feel it in the body? Some of us might feel it in the stomach, in the throat, especially if it is about saying no. And then we can ask ourselves, noticing what need or joy are asking for my attention. What is something that I'm maybe not giving to myself? And what is one thing I can do right now to add joy in? And if I re-engineer it back to my example, and it was really raw, and maybe some of the things I wish I could have applied 3 N's straight away then. For me, it was a lot of the intuitive movement. For me, I often feel the guilt in my throat as well, as my chest is kind of just goes all the way. And what I recognized that night, what was calling for my attention, was my ability to support myself. My ability to support myself and give myself kindness. And one thing I could do at that time was to stay with that. Just experiencing it, just letting it wash over me. And as I did that, I started to then develop more steps. And this is something that I can, there is a different thing that I can share with you, but essentially creating those micro steps of support. So if you are reflecting right now, what is showing up for you? What is coming up for you? It's something that might sound a little bit strange, but I invite you, if you are able to connect to some experience or feeling of guilt right now, or whether it's going to be in the future, I invite you to always say thank you. Thank you to that emotion. Because that feeling of guilt is a bit of a wake-up call. And all it does is just inviting you to be aware, be present. It's bringing you back into present. The guilt is giving you present. Who would have thought? And then welcome the other emotion in. And I want you to finish the practice today, and I'll keep it on the screen just in case if you are unable to hear it, if you want to screenshot it after. To process in the body, so this is the screenshot is very simple, but I will talk you through it. So right now I invite you to sit comfortably. We go for these 3 ends together. See if you have your feet connected to the floor, maybe gently press them into the floor. If you're lying down, you can always use that support of the floor or the bed underneath. But see if you can feel support underneath you, whether it's for your feet, whether it's for the hips, or even the whole back if you're lying down. Take a deep breath in. And if you are not able to name the emotion that you're feeling, that's okay. Just observe. Observe what it's like. And then notice where can you feel it in the body. Is it tension, tightness? Sometimes it might be tingling, warmth. Noticing. If you'd like, I invite you to think about bringing in more ease. And if you feel it in a particular part of the body, so as an example, if you feel it in your tight shoulders, maybe you can roll the shoulders. If you feel tightness in the chest, maybe you can place a hand on your heart. Maybe you can feel it in a faster breathing. Can you allow yourself to maybe slow down the breath a little bit? Imagine that you are paying attention, you are responding and nurturing. Maybe you can imagine breathing your breath with that sense of joy or comfort. Whatever it might look like. Maybe it's softening in that part of the body. Maybe it's a color. Maybe you are inviting say joy as saying the word. And notice how that feels. And if there is no significant shift, that's okay as well. Your body knows. And your unconscious mind knows. And when you're ready, coming up to receive it. And it was something that I wanted to share with you as a little gift. Because I have created a small ebook with that little bit of a process on shifting the energy from one end of the emotion towards the other, between the sisters. So inviting the sister or brother, just sometimes maybe some of the emotions might feel more like a brother than a sister. That's okay. So if you are watching on replay, send me a message, or I'll pop the download link. But I have created that frequency map to show the similar, so you can apply exactly the same process that we just walked through. Name, notice, nurture, for some of the other emotions. And I picked 7, the main ones: guilt, fear, self-doubt, shame, anger. And again, once again, you can see how I am smiling when I say those names out loud, because I do look at them as our helpers. I do look at them as my messengers. I do look at them as the invitation. The invitation, and I'm very grateful to the guilt that I had experienced in the past. And I'm very grateful for any guilt that sometimes shows up. I'm grateful for any of those emotions, because each and every time they give me an opportunity to build more of my self-trust. Because recognizing your emotions, and that's something that I really want you to think of, recognizing your emotions is a sign that you are listening. When the guilt shows up, when the anger might show up, or shame, this is just a message. And first thing first, you have gotten it. You got it. Okay, you might not like the message, but you received it. And that's your communication, processing it through the body, noticing where it lives. It's almost like creating that response. And each time you do that, each time you are building that trust with yourself. And each time you're teaching yourself that you are capable of handling of a naughty sister, or not even naughty. If you think about children, right? Quite often, what happens if we are maybe ignoring some request? The naughtiness often comes from, in some ways, not being the needs not being met for some reason. And we can't meet everybody's needs, but we can meet our own. You can meet your own. So I hope that this was helpful. And I hope that from now on, I wonder how, I would be really interested to see your feedback. How do you relate to this whole idea of guilt being your new best friend, if not yet? And I hope by reading my little book, you might recognize that, oh my gosh, I have so many good friends that I didn't even know. And the best thing about it is that you being friends with guilt does not exclude your friendship with joy. If anything, it only reinforces it.